Sean McCann. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Cosmic Peach Podcast. You know what it is. We got Sean McCann back, and I'm so excited. Sean, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm glad to be here again.
I'm happy that you're here too, because we had kind of talked about before what we were going to cover today, and I'm just going to start off with a little trigger warning for everyone that we're going to be discussing like genital mutilation, and it's a heavy subject. It is explicit. If it's not something that you're prepared to listen to, then don't. But it is very important that we talk about this. It's very
Right.
important that this topic is covered. And so if you had anything you wanted to add just as a disclaimer before we jump in, Sean, I'll just give you the floor.
Um, well, it's triggering for people that don't even know it will trigger them. You know, some people don't even know because the trauma of this practice is so deep, it uh the same mechanism that the brain uses to protect itself from satanic ritual abuse is the same mechanism that is blocking off the memory of the abuse. So the people, they don't even know that they were harmed, and they don't even know it's wrong. So that's why it's so important that we talk, because people need to understand, and people need to know the reality of what actually happens, because the people that experience this, they don't know, and it stays hidden for generations and generations, since the Canaanites. I mean, it's
Babylonian.
yes, it is Babylon, anti-human ritual magic, satanic ritual abuse, like straight up. So I don't know where you wanted to start. I guess go
What
ahead.
we're talking about is something that is super, super, super common.
Right.
And given that intro to the subject, you would think that we're talking about like cutting someone's eyelids off. No, we're talking about something that happens every single day,
Yes.
hundreds of thousands of times a day. It is circumcision
Right.
in hospitals, and I think there's even religious institutes that still practice doing the circumcision.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about. And it could
Right.
be male or female, because there are a lot of religious practices to do with female circumcision as
Right.
well.
Right.
But where does it really start? So it starts in Babylon, I'm sure.
Yes, it actually starts with child sacrifice. So in the old days, with black magic, they would, have these ritual orgies, with their rituals. They would have the orgies, and then children would be produced, and they didn't have modern day child sacrifice. The modern day child sacrifice of abortion is happening now, but back in the old days, they would do infanticide. They would kill the infants, and they would burn them in the fires of Moloch. Like, Moloch is a type of fire made for sacrifice. And the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, are the the inception of Judaism. Like, they're the beginning of Judaism, and they would they would sacrifice children to Baal, their lord. Lord, Baal means lord. And the Moloch is the type of fire that so it's like Moloch isn't the name of a god, and Baal is just the title. The actual name is Yahweh. These children were being sacrificed to Yahweh. They would they would they would take the blood, and then open the entrails, and then dump the baby into a fire. And then they would take the remains and put them in. They've got they call them tofet, and there are child remains that archaeologists have found. It is proven that this is the truth of the ancient practices. So that grows and evolves and turns into Judaism. And there's the story in the Bible about Isaac and Abraham or whatever. And so Abraham was told to sacrifice his kid, to kill the firstborn male. And that is in the book, like Yahweh owns all firstborn males, from the flock to the beasts in the field to your own children. It has to be sacrificed to Yahweh. So the practices started with the Tophets and the burning to Moloch, and then the Abraham story where, oh, you have to kill your kid, but then, oh no, we were just kidding. God doesn't really want you to kill your kid. But then God tells him to cut off the end of his penis. That is the sacrifice. That is like the substitution for the killing of the child. Instead, just chop the end of his penis off. Mm-hmm. So this ritual mutilation, so now the Jews, when they do their bris, it happens on the 8th day. That is in the book. All the beasts of the field and the flock or whatever, the firstborn males are allowed to lay with their mother and be with their mother for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, sacrifice. Same thing now, still happening. The Jews still cut the penis on the 8th day. So that is a direct line of reference to the child sacrifice of the ancient times. And the story of Abraham is like the instructions to the people, the Jews, like, oh, you don't have to kill your kids anymore. Now you chop their penis. And the Jews now, like, they are so adamant about chopping penises, they won't allow an intact male to be buried in the same graveyard as other Jews who were circumcised. They believe that the foreskin keeps them out of heaven.
Really?
It's so deep. Yeah. So, and they act like it's like to peel away the husk. Like it's like the peel of an orange and throw it away.
Yeah,
really,
because forever long it's been kind of made to be dirty.
Yeah.
Or made to the way that even Western women who are even my age in the dating world or whatever, if they even see an uncircumcised penis, they're like, oh, they must be dirty. That must be gross.
Yes.
So
that's mind control. That's mind control.
Yeah. You wonder if that's not been put in place in people's mind, because
right. It is,
and I'm not an advocate of this, but everyone knows that when you watch a porno, they're not uncircumcised. The sexy thing is circumcision.
Right.
The clean thing is
supposedly. But
right.
I mean, it's
but that they sexualize being circumcised.
Right. And they display a circumcised penis probably because the viewers are also circumcised and they want to relate to their own,
the audience.
And and then when the porn actress like worships the thing, oh, a penis, and then it's like whatever she does with it, really it's mangled and destroyed. Like a lot of times, well, anyway, when it's circumcised, the head of the glands becomes keratinized and it loses feeling and it becomes dried out and rough, and And all of the nerve endings, like almost all the nerve endings of the penis, are in the foreskin. So they want to display on camera somebody that's really having fun. Oh, it feels so good. But really, like, they don't feel what sex feels like, because that has been removed. So and with, it's just like pounding in, pounding. It's not,
Yep.
that's because their genitalia doesn't work right. Like the foreskin, it actually, it works like a suction cup to the vaginal labia. Like
Oh
they,
my God, you're making so much sense right now. Go ahead.
yeah. So like all of the juices of the female lubrication stay inside.
Mm-hmm.
And like the way that the head of the penis is shaped, when if it as it pulls out, if there's no foreskin, it's just pulling out all the lubrication. And it just,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
so yeah, so like in ancient days, they would say that a woman who lays with an intact man is more likely to fall in love with him, because she is more connected and bonded to him, because there is that sacred connection.
Mhm.
And the feelings are what is supposed to be there, what we've evolved to feel as mankind. Like we, that's how we're built. And if you want to think about like esoteric magic ideas, like this, the combination of the male and female is where magic happens. That's how creation happens, right?
Yes.
So the foreskin is the point of contact. That is the synapse point between the male and female, and they remove that. They forcefully cut it away. So it's an attack on creation itself,
Mm-hmm.
um, because they're satanic. You know, we can get into that later, I guess. But
That's so interesting to me because we are the only species on Earth that has sex for pleasure.
well, we
And
think
so,
bonobo monkeys,
oh,
it's
monkeys do too.
right. Yeah,
Well,
bonobos, they do that. Like when they, instead of shaking hands, they bang each other. But anyway,
but I think that cutting that away,
mhm.
it's almost to remove some of that pleasure as well.
It specifically, yes, and to cause the trauma. But go ahead.
Yeah, but like think about that. No circumcised male knows what it feels like to actually have sex
Right? Yes.
because they are missing it's literally the missing link.
Yes. Yes. Well said. Yeah. Yes, it is. And then like all of us males that are hearing this, that have never thought about this before, they want to deny that shit. They want to be like, "No way, my dick isn't broken. My dick works great. Women love
Mm-hmm.
my dick." And it's like an ego,
Mm-hmm.
we
It's
like
an
it's,
ego trip that I mean
yeah,
it's your manhood.
right. Right. And they don't want to recognize that it has been mutilated. Um, so basically, like every circumcision is a botch, in my opinion. Every time they use a knife, every time the knife touches the skin, it it destroys it. Like they can't. There's no such thing as a good circumcision. There's maybe one that doesn't cause pain when the person is making love in the future. But I have pain sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when it when
It's dry.
well, no, because there's not enough skin. And
Yeah.
if you pull down, it's like excruciating pain. And I guess this is pretty personal, but I
No,
like
that's fine.
one of
It's
my
a good.
exes, she was like doing her thing, and and I said, "Ouch, that hurts," and stop doing it like that. And she didn't believe me. She's like, "What do you mean? It doesn't hurt?" And I was like, "Yes, it does." And she's like, "Nah, it's just how you do it." Like she watched porn or whatever. I don't know. And I
Yeah.
was like, and I like we all of a sudden were not making love anymore. We were okay.
Mhm.
Now I need to show you what happens. And I showed her videos of babies being circumcised. And she was like kind of religious. She thought that it was a good idea because God said so. Oh, we're supposed to not have it. So whatever.
Mhm.
Oh man, it really triggered me. And I was like, nope, you're watching these videos now. And she was watching and the screams and like she was looking, she's like, well, I guess it's wrong that they're held down like that.
There's
Because like they're
so
strapped
much
down to
that
a
goes
board.
into it. Yeah, it's I've seen it and you'll never be the same
Right.
after you watch it.
Right.
And they're like instructional videos and you know, in the hospital like this is how you do it. And
Mm,
I don't know if you happen to listen to this episode, but I had Janet from Deplorable Nation on
okay.
and she either helped do them
Oh,
or she observed them because she worked at a clinic. And she explained to me how, because there's several different ways to do it.
yeah.
And she explained to me how they did it at her clinic. And she simply said that they take a cap that looks like a thimble
Yeah. It
and
tightens, it screws down.
yep,
Yeah.
it screws down on the tip of the penis. They
Oh,
pull the skin and then they take a scalpel and they go around the rim of the cap. And she said that it bleeds and bleeds and bleeds.
right.
She said there's
That's
so
why
much
vitamin
blood.
K shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the vitamin K. Because children, babies, I'm sorry, but babies, they don't have natural blood clotting abilities
Mm-hmm.
when they're first born. So, in order to cover up the destruction of circumcision, they inject all babies with vitamin K. And I was fighting with my own son. They had person after person come in to try to convince me vitamin K is good. Even the priest, like it was like a Roman Catholic birthing center, and they were like, "Look," and I was like, "Oh yeah, how do you know vitamin K?" And they said 6 babies in one hospital, the Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville. 6 babies died. And because of that, all babies have to get injected. And I was like, that's the same hospital? Like, don't you think maybe there's something other than like maybe their practices are and they were like,
Right.
we're not going to let you leave. We're going to tell the cops that you are a bad parent if you don't let us inject him. So anyway, this vitamin K is like it covers up because so sudden infant death syndrome is because circumcision. The babies bleed out.
Mm-hmm.
They die because of the damage done to them, and their wound is so destroyed. Um, I did a presentation with my wife about circumcision for my friends. My friend had a conference called Shattering the Illusion, and it was like maybe last year. And we did a presentation, and it's on my channel. You can find it. It's called His Body, His Choice. And we showed a clip of a mother explaining how to care for the wound and like what happened. Like, I mean, the blood sticks to the bandage, and she had to like rip the bandage off. So that's even more further damage. And like the skin heals to the glands. So like the way that an open wound does, it'll heal together.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother has to keep pulling back the skin and ripping it off again. And like it's more,
Oh.
yes. And then if that doesn't happen, then the skin is attached to the glands. It's just stuck there. And like you can't pull it down. It's like,
Oh my
it's
God.
gross. It's, yeah. So every cut is a botch. There is no like safe way to do it. That little piece of flesh has major blood vessels, like big blood vessels. You're looking at adult penis and there's big bulbous veins in it. you know?
Mhm.
And that little penis is the same veins, it's just smaller, you know? So if you cut large blood vessels, like
What do you think's going to happen?
you're
And,
gonna bleed out, right?
the thing that Janet said too that I want to remind new mothers of is that when they would bring their son, baby infant son, to the clinic or the hospital, wherever, to have this done, they would take the baby to another part of the clinic so the
Yeah,
mother couldn't hear the screams. And during the procedure, the baby would pass out
right.
from pain. It couldn't handle it. It was screaming, blood everywhere. It was horrific. The baby literally would pass out from the pain. They would clean it, wrap it up with the gauze, as you were saying, and they would hand the baby back to mom asleep. And they would say, "Oh, he didn't feel a thing. He was sleeping."
Right.
And the mom's like, "Look, my baby's asleep. Everything must have been fine." No, your baby's passed out from pain.
Right. It's more than passed out, it's dissociation. This is triggering dissociation in the youth. So, same thing of satanic ritual abuse, same thing. Circumcision is satanic ritual abuse, and it comes from satanic child ritual sacrifice. So, yeah,
Mhm.
nobody can argue with me on that shit. That is the truth. Um, so yeah, even doctors that do the circumcisions, a lot of them have been mutilated themselves too. So like they don't want to believe that it's wrong. They don't want to think it's bad, and they continue the practice. Um, a lot of them will like, to them, they like see the baby is like passing out or whatever. This is so there we have a safety mechanism in our brain, and this is the same thing that helps save satanic ritual abuse victims from uh, total destruction of the mind. Okay, because if they have that memory in there, and if they can remember it all the time, then that trauma will destroy everything. It's
It will consume them.
yes. So it walls it off and puts it into a separate place. And the during the trauma, the baby's consciousness goes over the rainbow. It leaves
Mhm.
the body so that it doesn't have to feel the pain. And because of that, um, because it's walled off in the memory, the adult male doesn't think that there's any problem. And then when the doctor says, "Hey, do you want to circumcise your baby?" The adult man says, "Oh, yeah, whatever. It's just a snip. It's just a cut. I want him to look like me, whatever."
Mhm.
And they don't know that they themselves were traumatically mutilated because it's so walled off. And that is what perpetuates, and it's even further with the Jews, because in that situation, the dad holds down the arms, the grandpa holds down the legs of the little baby. And then as the grandpa and the dad and all of the viewers, guests that are there to have cake and party, it's so sick. All of those people watching and participating are it's it it reminds them of their own trauma, but it's not in a way that like, oh, I remember getting uh mutilated. It's like it reasserts the domination that the priest has over the flock. So like if you so basically the priests own all the babies. If the priest can just come and mutilate your baby and suck its pain infused blood out of the wound, and you invite him to do so, like, then you are a total slave of that.
Mhm.
So circumcision used to be, in ancient times, it was called the mark of the slave. Okay.
What?
Yes. Yes. Because no one would allow that to happen except a slave, that has no will.
Wow.
And you see it like because people used to wear like togas and shit, like be naked all the time.
Mhm.
And like in Rome and stuff, if you're circumcised, then your head is exposed, like the glands is exposed,
Mm-hmm.
and that, like, it's obvious, like, and also, uh, in ancient times, if the glands was exposed, it's like vulgar and gross. Like what? Ugh. Because a normal penis that's not erect is not exposing that
It's
penis.
covered.
Right. And so somebody that's walking around with its glands out is like somebody that's like just jerking off and looking at people, like it's vulgar and gross.
Right.
Um, so people notice when the glands is exposed, and like that, you can't be like, I'm not a slave, and like, yeah, you are. Like there it is. You can't like grow it back or anything. I mean, it's permanent mark. And also, it aids in the slavery because it causes the person to dissociate and to allow, like, when that level of trauma happens again, you automatically just go back to the dissociative state. Instead of trying to fight or run like your natural, like, fight or flight, that the baby's held down and it
Mm-hmm.
can't move and it can't fight and it can't run. So its only choice left is dissociation. So now it trains that little brain to dissociate. When the master in the robes, the Jewish master that walks in the room, and all the other males are like, "Oh, okay, whatever you say, sir. I'll hold down my baby for you, sir."
Mm-hmm.
Or when like a doctor in his cloak, he's another kind of priest. Oh yes, sir. Whatever, you know more than I do. Uh, like that is it's proof that they are the master. And when that master comes in and has a plan of what it's going to do to your body, you just allow it. You just dissociate. And okay, I don't know. And so it starts the dissociation in the baby.
So,
And it's like a recurring, like the baby can always go back to that dissociation. It's like training the little brain that there's a third option, you know, other than fight or flight. So go ahead.
that and you and I have covered SRA in even young children, but not babies, like
Mhm.
what they do in these programs, that they start them as toddlers even.
Right.
And so
In the
that's,
womb, they start abusing, but whatever.
and then
Okay.
it continues,
Yes.
throughout. And I, that's one thing, but something that I want people to understand, that's not even a secret government program. That's something that you could go and watch actually happen, is one of these religious ceremonies where they're circumcising the baby.
Oh, yeah.
As an outside person, let me just tell you, as an outside person looking in, the sucking the blood from the tip of the penis, there is nothing in my mind that justifies someone doing that. There is nothing in my mind that justifies cutting the tip of a penis off and sucking the tip with
Right.
the blood.
Right.
Out of everything we've learned about satanic ritual abuse and satanic practices and black magic and everything, you tell me that that's not super fucked up.
Well, I mean, it's blood drinking. It is like it's a form of cannibalism.
It
And
is.
if anybody knows about, like, adrenochrome is kind of popular in the alternative sphere. Uh, there's more than just adrenaline in the blood. Like humans are drug factories. Like we make endogenous chemicals, which, we feel dopamine and serotonin, all these things, and stuff is in the blood while we are being tortured. We are infusing that blood with these chemicals. And
Mhm.
the Satanists that do these blood drinking rituals are addicted to that. They get high from that. They, plus their wiring in their brain from their own satanic abuse, they feel pleasure when they cause pain. It's like their wires are flipped.
Mhm.
Also, Well, we know that the satanic ritual abuse, they combine sex with pain, like pleasure and
Yes.
pain together to,
Pain is pleasure. That's
right,
how they rewire your brain into thinking pain is pleasure.
right. So circumcision is that male baby's first sexual experience. I know you're like, what? But in order to differentiate the skin from the the internal penis, they have to jerk it off. They have to make the little baby hard. They give him an erection. And then so the baby's feeling pleasure. First time it's ever had pleasure from that part of its body. Oh, and then it gets hard, and then they clamp it, and then they cut it. And then the Jewish ones suck the blood. So,
Whoa.
yeah, right. Another reason
What
why
a
it is satanic
mind
ritual.
twist. Yes.
Yeah. It is the most disgusting shit. Like, I'm glad you gave the trigger warning because this is like, and those of you that are listening that are brave enough to listen, this is so important. This is how our brains work. Our brains and our bodies are one. We are connected. Our soul is connected to our body. And when you attack the body, you are attacking the brain itself because the brain is wired in. We are connected to every piece of our body. That's why people that are survivors of satanic ritual abuse, their memories are stored in their body, like acupuncture or like massage or tapping like they do can bring up these memories because anyway, so the brain and the body are one, and the mind and the brain are one, and the soul and the body is one. And if you think about, like, I don't know, I think pretty deeply about this stuff, but if you think about what Crowley was doing with sex magic and all of this, like, he needed to use the foreskin in order to attain those feelings and to access those points of his brain.
Wow.
So if they remove it, we can't feel those things. We can't have those experiences, and maybe we can't connect spiritually. Maybe it severs something of our soul as well as our body.
Oh my God. You're cutting off the God connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where the creation happens, like I said earlier. And like the whole thing with like the infanticide of the past, instead of killing the baby, they're just clipping the penis. That in ancient days, it was not like, it's likely that the baby wouldn't survive. So it is like the same as infanticide, but it not only, but if it does survive, it's mangled and it doesn't work properly. And in a sense, that also is population reduction, because then that, like, the family line of the father who's bringing his baby to the priest is being cut, you know. In modern days, like, it still works. Like, I have a son, like, it still works, but it is an attack on the generation of our family. So
Needless to say, you did not have your son circumcised.
oh, of course not. No.
So you knew about all this before you had a son.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is why I want to hear listeners to hear this, because there's a lot of people that might have a son someday. And maybe they're pregnant now and they're hearing this for the first time. Please look into it. Look into what I'm saying. There's a really good documentary called American Circumcision, and it will make you cry. It's very well done. And they talked to Marilyn Milos, who is an intactivist. She's been working for years. Like, she tells a story about how she was a nurse and she was helping.
Like Janet.
Yes. And
Mhm.
she's like, this little baby's crying uncontrollably. And as the doctor's, and she's crying, watching this baby, and the doctor turns to her and says, you know, this is medically unnecessary. And she's like, ah, you know, and then like, and this was happened after she circumcised her sons. And then she recognizes what she did to her own sons. And then the rest of her life is to fight this so that it never happens to anyone else's sons.
Oh my God.
It's really heart wrenching. And then you hear from other doctors that are like, oh, you know, botched circumcision isn't, it's whatever. I do about 5 botch repairs a week, you know?
What?
Yeah. And they talk about like, so, and then once the baby leaves the hospital, there's no, you know, aftercare or like seeing what happened, you know? So like
Mhm.
all of these kids that leave the hospital, no one knows if it's a botch. You know, it could be 90% are botch, you know. Uh
So that line, I mean, let's just be really open and honest real quick.
right.
You know, the line that goes around, that's the
Yeah, yeah, the
line where they
scar.
cut. That's
Yes.
the scar.
Yes.
How do they know if they went too far down?
They don't.
They just wing it, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of the time, in my
Because
experience,
they have
it's
to,
just,
right, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say it's just uneven looking. It's like all the way around the penis. It's just like kind of like there's no,
Jagged, ragged.
yes, it looks jagged. It looks
Right.
uneven. It
Yes.
it looks botched.
Yes. All of it. Yes. You're right. You're
All
right.
the ones I've seen
Right.
look like they've been botched.
And if you see some that are curved and like,
I have.
that's because they cut too much on one side.
Oh my God.
Right. Uh,
And it's caused like a
and it causes
dysfunction in
it
the
to
penis.
pull on one side. So as it's grown over the years, it just goes like that. And now
Oh
it's
my God.
right. And, you know, sometimes, you know, maybe not you, but other people, they have seen like the skin of the shaft is attached to the head at one
Mhm.
point, and that's another because the people didn't pull it away and it healed on there. And so now if you pull on
What?
it, it'll like
It'll hurt.
pull everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, it hurts. And then so these people that have mutilated penises, they are feeling pain as they do the sex. And in order to feel anything at all, they just have to pound away because
Right.
they don't have any feelings down there. It's just like a heavy weight just pushing. And like the only reason that they like, it's not like, I mean,
That
okay,
makes so much sense.
it does feel kind of good. It feels kind of good, but it's not like women orgasm. They're like, oh, you know, like I imagined I was in a different place, and they, you know, the shaking and like all of this, and
Yes.
like for a dude, it's just like for circumcised. For myself, I guess I can't talk for everybody, but it's like I mean, there's a drive internally, like I need to, like I want to
Have
have
sex
sex,
with my
obviously.
wife or
Right,
like, yeah.
exactly. And
Mhm.
like I want to feel the connection with her and I want to be in love and um but a lot of times it'll go numb. It like I lose feeling completely while it's happening. Like
Oh my God, I have heard that before.
uh right.
You would not be the first person I have heard that from.
I mean, I'm being very honest and I'm revealing a lot of my own
No,
it's like I never really talk about this. But
I think that you are super brave to come out and say that and be real and be realistic because dudes have such an ego. Like
right,
they do not want to admit that there's an issue with their stuff.
right.
They would rather
And
die than admit that there's an issue with their stuff. So I
right.
applaud you. I think
Thank
that
you.
that's very important to talk about.
Thank you. A lot of women that are hearing this, they don't know. They just think that dick feels good to the guy, you know,
Because
whatever.
why though? We've been programmed to think that men are driven by sex. That's all they can think about. They can nut any
Right.
time of the day. They can nut 17 times a day, that it always feels good,
Uh,
that it's amazing for the guy. And that is how women have been programmed to think about
right.
men. When
Right.
in reality, actually, women are more lusty and like sexually driven, and like they can orgasm multiple times.
Yeah.
That's a woman's makeup, actually, not a man's, because
Mhm.
usually a dude nuts and then it's over, but a
Yeah.
woman can continue to be aroused.
Right. Right.
So it's actually not true. They flipped the roles.
Yeah. And she, like, really, like in American Circumcision, they have a gentleman that still has his foreskin, and he gives like presentations, and
Mm-hmm.
like he talks about all the different ways that he can orgasm. Like he can just with two fingers touch this little piece, and then over here you can just move this little over here, and like all of that is removed from, so these males, they have the drive to pound away and to like dominate, you know so
Because they
this
can't fucking feel it.
right. And well, I mean, they can, there's a little feeling, but it's
To
not
a
the
degree,
same.
but it's
Right.
not amplified.
Right. And it like we don't, and then like because of the culture, you know uh I am powerful, man, I have powerful dick or whatever,
Yeah.
and my dick is big, and like, oh, look how big mine is. And really, that the reason they're saying, and the reason that men are so worried about how big their dick is because part of it was removed.
Oh, wow.
Internally, they think like they know that their dick
That's
is
the
smaller than it should be because part of it was taken away.
insecurity
Yes.
complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's all because they were circumcised. Like,
Do you know what they do with the foreskin after it's removed?
yes,
Because
I
I
do.
feel like there's probably some real dark shit that goes on with that.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that we can talk about. So first, let's talk about Sandra Bullock talked about it. She was on Ellen DeGenerate, her show there, and she was explaining about this facial procedure that she does for beauty, keep her facial skin nice and young looking. And she explained, and she was having trouble explaining it too because she knows how wrong it is, that they take baby foreskins and grind them up and inject them into women's faces.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. And they use them in vaccine, and it's called fibroblast. They use it in vaccines, um, and they use it in their dark ritual. I mean, it is the result of pain, just
Mhm.
like blood. And so in the old days, well, I don't know if it's still happening. There's this Jewish thing called blood libel. I don't know if you ever heard that term before,
Mm-mm.
but it's a practice of bleeding uh, a sacrificial victim. And you can look at, and there's a lot of cases of it in history. And if you look at, there's one called Simeon de Trent, or Simon de Trent, and I think that was the case where all the Jews were kicked out of England because, like, it's horrific child abuse. They're like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's one of the big reasons why everybody hates the Jews, because they mutilate and destroy their own babies, and it's ghastly horrific. You know,
Mhm.
ancient Rome, if you circumcised yourself, they would crucify you on a cross because it's so wrong. So if you circumcise others, like, ugh. So anyway, Simeon de Trent was a little baby Christian boy. I don't know, he was like a few years old, 5, maybe less. And a group of Jews abducted him and bled him. So you did a podcast about, and you were talking about Dr. Sleep the other day
Mhm.
and about Baseball Boy.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
right. So baseball boy in this movie, they they make little cuts all over his body, and the steam or whatever, they're like sucking out the steam.
yes.
That is a artistic representation of blood libel. So instead of steam coming out, it's blood, and they drink the blood. So they keep the baby alive, and they make little cuts that just bleed, enough so that he stays alive for a long time. And in that prolonged period of pain, he's making all those endogenous chemicals, and it's being infused into the blood, and it's being excreted out through these wounds. And they collect the blood, and they circumcised Simeon, and they collected, and there's like paintings of it, and there's a huge bowl where they're collecting this blood from his penis. Um, and then if you look at West Memphis 3 and Damien Eccles and what they did to one of those babies, they removed the skin of his penis
They did.
and they kept it.
They did.
What is that? Because that is ritually important. That is why the Jews still do it, you know? So it's the same. They are draining, they are getting high on the abuse of babies. And it's happened all through history. And that's, like I said, why people hate the Jews now, and through all history. And well, that plus, so all of these, they're all bonded in their trauma. And I don't mean to talk bad about Jews. People that are raised Jewish, like, it's not their fault. And a lot of them are beautiful, loving people. I love humans, I just don't like
I
mine.
love humans too. I
Right.
don't like satanic ritual abuse
Right.
that is hidden under the mask of, well, we do this for God. No, you're doing this because you're fucked in the head and
Right. There's
you're
mind control.
yes, you're controlling others through ritual magic.
Yes. Yes. And that, like, certain Jews that choose with their own free will to do so. They just happen to be Jewish. But also, like, in America, plenty of non-Jews circumcised. Like, I'm Irish Catholic and I'm abused, Jesus, there's lots of places in the Bible where it says don't circumcise. Jesus
Yeah,
is the
I
new
I was
law.
actually going to ask you about that
Right.
because he did say that in the
Right.
New Testament. He was like, you no longer
Right.
need to practice circumcision,
Right. Right.
but we still do it. Why is that?
Because Jews are in control of the American pediatric the formal government structure of pediatrics and child care is run by Jews. And they even say, like, they admit that there is no reason to do it, but they still recommend it's done. In the old
Wow.
days, the reason that they would give was, oh, it'll keep
Be
him from,
cleaner, I'm
well,
sure.
that's one thing that they tell people, that because smegma, that word, it's like so inside of the foreskin, the penis cleans itself, and it like pushes out dirty stuff. And like, if it gets dirty inside, it can seem kind of funky in there, but all you got to do is pull it back and clean it with even
Clean it.
water. You don't even need. But so this idea of the smegma, they like, it's like the most horrible thing for Jews and whatever, but it's really not dirty. And a female genitalia does the same thing. It's self-cleaning,
Mhm.
and it doesn't like, and babies should never be retracted. Children, all the way up until they're like puberty, the foreskin and the glands are fused like a fingernail on a finger. It's one piece. So never retract. If you If you think you're good and you didn't circumcise your kid, oh, but I got to clean inside, don't do that. Do not, because it will mangle the penis worse than a cut with a scalpel. So never retract your babies. Just needed to say that. Um,
Mm-hmm. See, I wouldn't have known that
right,
because everybody wants to clean everything, you
right.
know.
Only an adult penis, because it's like a hymen on a female. Like as the penis grows and starts to uh, have erections and stuff, that will naturally dissolve and fall away, and then it will be able to start retracting. But a child's penis stays covered all the time,
Mm,
all the time. So anyway, I mean, it might get hard, but it's still covered. You know,
right.
it's a natural way. It's so anyway. That's also part of the pain of what they do. Like your friend there, or the woman that came on your show and describing it, they don't just put the bell on. They have to separate. They have to tear away the foreskin before they put the bell on. So
Mm,
that also is pain,
mm.
and you know, and with the Jews, they use a fingernail to do it. They use a thumbnail to
They
separate.
do not.
Yeah, they take their dirty thumbnail and they stick it in, and they scrape the foreskin away from the glands so that they can pull away the skin, so that then they can cut it off.
Sean,
And then they suck the blood.
why? You know, I I would say that I am pretty pretty level-headed about things. And I talk a lot about how perfect our DNA is and how
Mhm.
we have that God gene inside of us. So if we're born a certain way,
Right.
all men are born with this,
Mm.
why are we cutting it off?
Because Satanists, because
I
they
mean, that
hate
has
God,
to be it, Sean. That
right?
has to be it. We're
They
born
hate
with
creation. They hate us. They hate being trapped here. They see this place as hell. And the more babies that are born here, the worse it is. They want to, they, like, if you look at the Ophite Gnostics, I think is the term. The Gnostic idea is that this place was created by an evil demiurge, and we are prisoners here in this hell. So they kill the babies. You know, they try to have less um, birth and creation, because God, I get whatever. God is the essence of creation and growth and love, and the combination of opposites to create more. You know, and the Satanists, they focus on the destruction and the disillusion and the decay. They think that decay is just as powerful as growth, and this focus of theirs keeps them. They think that this is a prison hell, and that's why they use the tesseract as their symbol, because it's a cube within the cube. It's like an eternal prison, and the more it tries to extrude out, it stays in the cube. So they believe that they are in hell, and they want to be rulers of this hell. Better to be a ruler in hell than to serve in heaven, right? They see this here as hell, this existence we're in. And they want to fight the creator who put them here. So it's almost like a mind virus. Um, and we see the elites, in quotes, that want this population reduction. People like Margaret Sanger, who did the Planned Parenthood, and people like George Bernard Shaw, who says that you should tell a panel of experts why you deserve to have life, and if you can't explain it well enough, we're going to kill you off. Like all the like Malthus and all of this, it all comes from the Gnostic ideas. Like the Templars were Ophite Gnostics. They didn't have babies. They would do homosexual sex because and they would put their creative, their their organ of creation, they would shove it into a trash hole, you know.
Mm.
It's like a fu to God, you know.
Do
And
you
this
think that the circumcision has led to perverted sexual behaviors in men?
totally, yes, yes, because of the lack of feeling and because of the combination of pain and pleasure, uh sadomasochism and violence, and the connection of violence and sex. The TV gives us that again and again, and in our mind, like, oh, I need to dominate and take sex because I want this violent sex.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was dominated by someone else, and I am a helpless victim, so I'm gonna dominate this woman and pound the hell out of her, you know. With
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Take your time and explain this
no.
because I feel like it's very, very important.
Yes. So, like, if you look at the way that American men think and Jewish men, but really, like in Europe, they don't do this. In Asia, they don't do this. In Africa, like, I guess in Africa, they circumcise males, but it's some tribes, and it happens when they're like 13. So it's like a separation from the mother. It's like now you're a man, and it's like this traumatic experience
Mm.
to separate their life from childhood to adulthood. And all other tribes that do, and all other peoples that do circumcision, they do it then. Only the Jews do it as babies, and Americans, because they're told to do it by Jews. Right.
Right.
So like this, if you look at the way that males are and the way that they think and how aggressive and domineering the American culture is, and warring, and how we want perpetual war and domination of others. And then if you look at the state of Israel and like how they want to dominate everything and like rule everything, be the powerful, be the thing that is the abuser instead of being abused anymore. I am now in order to be powerful, I have to be the abuser, or else I'm just going to continue to identify with the abused.
Mm-hmm.
So like that works with SRA too. Like if you abuse somebody far enough, they no longer dissociate, they just crack and they become psychopath. So, the trauma of circumcision and the other traumas of birth, there's many birth traumas, and Janice Barcelo is very good for explaining those birth traumas. I'll give you her email. I did a show with her just recently, and I plan on doing more. She's very knowledgeable in birth trauma and all the different ways that doctors abuse that process and how they abuse the mothers and the babies at the same time to create a dissociative slave child. And it's a huge system, like the way that they give us, like, never forget 9/11, like, and we had to look at the building getting crashed and like look at the explosion, people jumping out of the buildings, like that was trauma to us. And then they kept showing us on the TV, and then they kept being like, never forget, never forget. And that created in us a dissociative pattern, so that we are just like, oh, trauma and like, oh, terrorism. And then they take that and they wield it. And then, so it feeds their dark ritual that they plan.
Mm-hmm.
And their dark rituals are really meant to cause mind control in the victims. Like, really, that's what a dark ritual does. So like magic is mind control, it's the magician wants to further his will into the world. And if you can take away the will of your victim and implant your own will into that victim, then it is an automaton robot doing everything you want. That's how
A Manchurian candidate.
Yes, yeah. And like the hardcore trauma that Fritz Springmeier talks about in his books, and like, Kathy O'Brien, like that create that's like a high-end form of this same trauma. So they give us light they give us light trauma with circumcision and 9/11 and the TV, but it is the same. It's just a lesser um, volume, I guess, of
Yeah.
trauma, but it still impacts our brains the same way. And really, the more I study, the more I realize that trauma is the only way that they make mind control. Even like if you look at the pandemic crap, like they traumatized us. They put masks on our face. They didn't let us like do
Be
our own
with our
life.
families, live a
Yes.
life, go
Yes.
outside,
Yes.
nothing,
And
treated
that
like
caused us,
prisoners.
yes. And now we're compliant slaves. And now we're going to do it again. Oh, well, I guess we got to wear a mask again. Like, whatever. You know, because we're taught we just roll over and let it happen. Like,
I talk
that's,
about this a lot actually, Sean, and
yeah.
what I compare it to is an abusive relationship, like with a boyfriend that beats you up and then he's really sweet and nice to
Yeah.
you and
The
then he'll
love
beat you up
bombing.
again. But
Yep.
it's like a chokehold, like they squeeze your neck and then they release you a little bit and you catch your breath again and then they squeeze your neck again.
Right.
You're choking, you can't breathe, you think you're going to pass out, but then they let up and then you can breathe again,
Right.
and it's literally torture. And just because they're not physically squeezing your neck to the point of you passing out doesn't mean that that's not what they're doing, because it's psychopathic behavior.
Right.
It's like waterboarding
Yes.
you, and you just get so wore down to the point
Yes.
of compliance.
Right.
And actually, if you look at any psychopath, the way that they would torture people is what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
There was actually a girl who survived Ted Bundy, and she wrote a book about it, and she said his favorite thing to do was to choke me until I was about to pass out, and then he would let up on me, and then he would choke me again, and then he would let up on me. And then she said he also took her down to a river and would hold her head under the water and then let her up and then hold her head under the water and then rape her. And then this is we're dealing with psychopaths, but we're dealing with psychopaths on a governmental scale.
Yeah.
So what do you think that they're doing to us?
Well, I think that they are they are using us as as like a primordial energy to further their black magic rituals. Like they want to ascend uh out of this place. And I think that they, by making us total slaves, they become kings of this world, and this feeds their ego. They, you know, really Satanism is like ego time to like to the max, and like that self-love and disconnection from creator. Um, I think that really they're making us slaves. They are using the blood and the parts for their, you know, injections and face stuff. And
They want to put I think that they even put some of it in face creams
oh yeah,
and stuff that even if I wanted to go buy it,
right,
it's in Estee Lauder, I think, or
right,
Lancome, which are brands that they sell at Dillard's.
yeah, it's sick.
It's
They
for
make
the common person
billions.
now.
They make billions off
Yeah.
of the foreskin, off of the trauma of babies. And they're not going
Well,
to stop unless we choose. This is okay. This is the one thing that I didn't say yet. The most important thing is mothers, like all mothers, the mother has final say. Like with the law,
mhm.
with that baby belongs to the mother. Even the father can't make that baby be circumcised. The mother has to comply. So the most power that you have as a mom is to say no. And they're going to try to, maybe they'll can try to convince you. I know people whose families are like, you gotta circumcise. Oh, and like, oh, it's, it's religious or it's so important. And they want to continue the perpetuation of it because they are abused. They think
Yep.
wrong. And all mothers need to put their foot down and say no. Protect your babies. Also, if the baby, another thing, if you want to have a bond, a loving bond with your baby, don't cut off his foreskin, because that baby in inside it already believes that it can trust you and you're going to protect it, and it is like it looks to you for care and love and help. And if you give it away to some priest to hold it down and to cut the most sensitive part of his body, and babies feel 3 times more pain. They used to say babies don't feel pain. They used to do open heart surgery on babies with no anesthesia. But
Ooh.
yeah, because of the people are so stupid. So anyway, this baby that feels this huge pain and then is brought back to the mother and given to the mother, it's dissociated, its brain is destroyed, and the mother's like, and some mothers say he's changed and he's never like. It's proven that the baby changes and never goes back. There was a study in Canada. These nurses that had to do the circumcisions, they wanted to actually prove what happens to the baby's brain. And one of the nurses volunteered her own son because her husband was adamant, like, you must circumcise, and she complied with her husband. And they did this like in an MRI. They used a stone, like I forget what kind of stone it is, but it's sharper than steel. It's like anyway, so it's not magnetic. And they put him in this MRI machine and they took his vitals and they looked at his brain, and then they did the circumcision with no anesthesia. And that baby's brain changed. It did not light up in the same way. And then they brought it back a month later, still broken. Brought it back 2 months later, still messed up. It never went to its original baseline configuration. The brain is changed forever. So they bring this baby back to the mother, and the mother's like, oh, I got my little baby. Oh, I'm going to love on it. And the baby is just blank, does not feel. It looks to you, mom, who gave it away, it can't trust you anymore. It is alone in this world. It's like, and this world is a hell where people will just tie it down and take away part of its body against its will.
So the mother who is of the understanding of what's about to happen is consenting to the abuse. They always need your consent for the abuse. Oh my God.
They don't just take your baby and do it. They have to ask first. And they call it, in America, they call it routine infant circumcision. The way that they ask is, all right, like, you're getting circumcised, right? Like, they just assume, but they still have to comply. The mother still owns the baby. And there have been some cases where the dad wants it done and the mother says no, and they go to court and the dad loses every time. So that the mother is still connected to that baby. And if you want to have a loving bond with your baby, and if you want that baby to trust you and love you, don't ritually sacrifice the thing to the dark overlords that wear a white coat, because
do you think that like the problems with sensitivity down there and the ritual abuse and how it changes the mind, do you think that for a long time they have been doing this because it leads to kind of like what we were talking about earlier, perverted sexual tendencies like homosexuality, or even this new transgenderism thing where they can't feel their dick, so maybe they think that they're a girl?
Well, I never thought of it that
They
way.
can't feel their dick, so maybe they want to see if they have this
Hmm.
gender reassignment, if they can feel it.
I don't know. I don't know if that's that's kind of much. I don't know if they would ever, but I'm glad that you brought up this current.
Like, what if you, like, just think about if you can't really feel your dick to the fullest extent.
Right. But that's all you've ever known. So you don't know you're missing. So
I'm
like,
just trying to
yeah,
think,
yeah.
like, what, like, if it could cause some dissociation with your own gender.
Well, it causes a certain level of dissociation from your own genitals because like if you are pounding away really fast and whatever, it might go numb or whatever, and then you actually aren't connected to the feelings of it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
dissociating literally. Uh, but I never really thought of it like what you just asked. But the way that the males who have had it done, they don't know it's missing until they see something like American Circumcision or hear this podcast or whatever. They don't know why they want to tell everybody how big their dick is or how like why a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't think like even my dad like I mean he told me the other day about like he realized this like and he agrees with me it's wrong but it took him all this time and he's got a dog now, a corgi, and um, people ask him like, "Oh, are they born with that short tail?" And he's like, "No, they cut the tail off." And then he says like, and then he's like, "I really disagree with it." And then once he said that, he realized like, because he knows that I do this podcast, and he knows that I did that presentation about circumcision, and all of a sudden it clicked with him. He's like, "Wait a minute." Oh, we're not. It's wrong for dogs, but why is it okay for baby humans? Why are we cutting off pieces of humans? And then
Damn.
it finally clicked for him, and I was like, yeah, because I own my body. No one is allowed to do anything to it unless I consent. If I want to pierce my ears or if I want to drink Drano or whatever, that's my choice, and nobody else can hold me down. And you know, and he's like, he told me he was like, I never thought of it. And he was involved in the decision to abuse me. Him and my mom
Mm-hmm.
decided. And he
It's like
never thought,
when they cut dogs' ears off, even.
right? That too. It's so wrong. Like, why do
I
we
don't
think,
agree with it. Have
right?
you ever seen a dog whose ears have been freshly docked off?
Oh, yeah.
It's
The
horrific
bandages that
looking.
stick. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The stitches, like I've seen them get sewed up, and that's mutilation that people who are dog lovers like I am, when you see it, you're horrified. You're like,
Right.
"Oh my God, why are we doing this?"
Right.
Well, it looks nice. It's profitable if
Right.
they have their tails docked. It's profitable if they have their ears clipped.
Right.
So
And they look
we're
meaner, and
just,
people are more scared of my Doberman when
yeah.
it has pointy ears, like so fucking stupid. And like a lot of people, they love and care for their animals, but then their babies are like, oh, it's normal. It's just a snip. Because that trauma is so hardcore. It is enveloped in their mind. It is locked away. And my dad never thought of it because it was trauma and he's not allowed to. His brain won't allow him to think of it. So, and mothers never want to admit that they abused their baby so hard. Like
Hmm.
mothers want to be protecting, loving. They don't want to. No, it's not trauma. It's just a snip. It's no, that's not true. Oh, babies don't feel pain. No, he was sleeping. They
You're
don't want to
right.
recognize that they did that. So my mom, we had, God rest her soul. She passed away just recently.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
thank you. She would never, she wouldn't admit that it was trauma. And with all that I said and do, and all I yelled at her, and she can't. She just wouldn't. And now, and like I've grown to realize, like I know that she was unable to, because she would never want to hurt her little baby. And I love her for that. I know that she didn't want to hurt me, but she was under mind control. She was the doctors, the dark occultists convinced her, you know, and but she doesn't want to recognize that she agreed to traumatize me. She loves me, you know. And my dad never wants to think about, just won't think about it because he doesn't want to recognize his own trauma and he doesn't want to think he's abused or broken. That's why it perpetuates through forever, you know. And in the old days, they had excuses. Oh, it's good, you know, and then they can tell themselves it's not trauma. It's good. You know, maybe now that I circumcised my kid, he won't masturbate. And masturbation is all the problems of the world come from masturbation. You know,
that brings up another thing I wanted to ask you about. Do you know anything of female genital mutilation?
Yeah, I do, sadly.
So I have heard that it was to keep the women from masturbating and being promiscuous.
Right. It's like some women are sealed up altogether. And they can't even pee.
They can't even pee.
Like
they just sew their lips shut.
Right.
Like so barbaric.
And a lot of time they'll cut the clitoris off. They'll just cut it off. And that's like as if we had our glands fully removed as males, like and the clitoris has all the nerve endings, just like the foreskin has all the nerve endings. So it is a form of domination of the female. Like it dominates her in a way that she will never cheat on her husband. And it proves to the husband that she has never been penetrated by another male because it's sealed up and they can't.
Oh my God.
And then wedding night is more horrific pain where the male has to break through that sealed up wound.
Oh, Jesus.
Right. So that it's like supremely, like it's a re-traumatization of the woman, and the women of the tribe are the ones who do it to the girl, and they hold her down just like in the Jewish ceremony where the male father and the male grandfather hold down the baby. And it's a severing of like this baby girl can no longer trust its mother or the other women in the tribe. And look at this. And by the all the women doing it to that young female, it proves to them, oh, this is necessary, and oh, it's not trauma, and oh, it's normal, and it further keeps it from being realized that it is trauma, even though the little girl is screaming and crying. It's like, oh, that's part of life, and oh, you have to do this. And so it's just another example of total mind control and domination. So in the Jewish sense, they're dominating the male mind, and in this female circumcision, they're dominating the female mind. Because
you know, they still practice that to infants in the hospital in Saudi Arabia. Female circumcision.
Really, to infants?
Infants. So, and I'll tell you how I know this. And I brought this person up before, and it was not a great relationship, but I dated someone who was from Saudi Arabia, like straight from Saudi Arabia. He was here to go to school. So he was on a school visa. And I met him and we started dating or whatever. At the time, he was really polite, and a lot of westernized culture is, you know how dating is. Like you meet a guy, they're kind of, you know, they got their weird things, but like in Saudi Arabia, they have like this essence about them. Like they're very polite, and, you know, they seem like they're very kind and generous. And then you really get to know them and they turn out to be a psychopath because of the indoctrination and the programming. And he was very strictly religious. He was Muslim, and he would make me like fast with him and do Ramadan. And if my shorts were too short, it was a problem. If my shirt was too low cut, it was a problem. I wasn't allowed to sit in the living room with him when his friends were over, because that
Wow.
was just for the men, and the women go to the bedroom. So I'm not going to say it was a positive experience. This is just one person, so I can't use a blanket statement and say everybody from Saudi Arabia is like this. But I did learn a lot from him about indoctrination and mind control from religion being with him. And he said that when his sisters were born, and it's a common practice in Saudi Arabia that they cut their clits off, like as soon as like they're born, and then they just cut their clits off. And he said that's so they don't cheat on their husbands.
Right.
And
Domination.
right. And even with my conspiracy brain at the time, this was years and years ago, I was thinking, is that why they're so submissive and they cover their heads and they cover their bodies and they're so easily controlled? Like, no, you can't drive. No, you can't work a job.
Right.
No, you can't leave the house without your husband. They've literally had their clits cut off at birth.
Right.
I mean, it would be easy to program someone's mind to think that they're worthless.
Yes.
If you started your life off with getting your clit cut off.
Same
like,
thing
of
with
course
the
I
males.
need to cover my head.
Right.
Of course I can't show my hair. Of course I can't show my body. I'm worthless.
Of course I need to do what they say, because they can just tie me down and cut me up again.
Think about
I don't
that,
own my
Sean.
body. I don't own my body. They can take it off. They can, and that works for both males and females. Like, it's the same. Like, we own our bodies. Like, that is the number one rule. Like, I own myself, and you can't do nothing to it unless I say, like, even drug laws are like a claim of ownership over you. If I can't smoke weed because my job will fire me or some shit, like, or because the government will put me in a cage. Like, I own my body. I'm going to smoke weed when I choose to. And if you got a problem with that, sorry, but the domination of the government and of the elders of the tribe or whatever, it's just like, every time I pee, I see the scar. It's another reminder, like, I've been like held down, and I don't own my body. I can't have these. I'm not allowed to have those nerve endings. Just like the young women in Saudi Arabia, they're not allowed to have a clitoris. They're not allowed to feel pleasure, because the males, the dominating, also circumcised, like the Muslim males,
they are circumcised too.
Yes.
And something else that I learned from him while we were together is that to keep their purity, when women feel promiscuous and they have not yet been married off, they will do anal sex all the time. They will just be like, I want to have sex, but I have to remain pure for my husband.
Right.
So they'll meet up secretly with men and they'll do anal, and that is their first sexual interaction.
Right.
Is anal.
Right. And which, if you learn about Crowley, that anal is connected to your root chakra, and it can do Kundalini type magic, and it can really affect the brain in negative ways. Yeah. And so also I've heard of Catholic nuns that do that because they're married to Jesus.
I've heard that too. They do anal.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So yeah. So
I'm
like
not interested in doing anal for my first sexual experience. That sounds really traumatic.
Yeah, it's intended to be, and that's like, it's painful, I guess. Like, and like Crowley tried to combine semen and the blood from bloody anal to make a homunculus, like to try to make life in that hole instead of the vaginal hole, where he can have a soulless being and then put a soul into it, so that really messed up magic. But that's the kind of
Wow.
stuff that they think about. That's like these people that have been ritually abusing all this time, like it affects us spiritually and mentally, and it affects the kind of person that we become. So, like you said, those women are more submissive. They agree to being covered and they agree to not go to school or not drive or whatever because they are so physically dominated.
Mhm.
And that's women revert to that to be the submissive, but males revert to being the aggressor because instead of being submissive and let that happen to me again, I'm
Mhm.
going to be the one to do it to others so that no one will. I'm going to be the tiger,
Mhm.
and so that's why the American like mind is so warlike, is so
Yes.
quick to kill and all this. Same thing with the Israel, like state of Israel and what they do. They dominate the Palestine. I mean, it makes sense mentally. Like that's because they have been dominant. They want to dominate others, and so it
It's
all
so
fits into
fucked up.
one big human slavery scheme. And if we can just choose to say no, we might be able to survive their machinations, their evil. Like we can say no to circumcision, we can say no to their vaccines, we can say no to their poison food, water. Like we can protect our kids from the EMF radiation. We can teach them about how this mind control is destroying the rest of society. Like we can make a real pure human if we choose, and it's up to us to put our feet down and say no.
It's always an attack on creation.
Yes.
Because if you think about something that used to be a practice way, 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 way back in time was being a eunuch where they would cut your balls off.
Right.
Now, they don't do that anymore. They can't castrate you and chop your nut bag off, but
Some
they
people
can
do.
chemically castrate you.
Yes.
And you are eating the food, you're drinking the water, you're
Hmm.
doing all these things. They're spraying chemicals down on us,
Right.
injecting us with shit that
Yes.
chemically castrates you. And women too, with birth control pills. Gardasil vaccine has fucked a lot of people
Right.
up and they can't have babies anymore. And so they are chemically castrating us on top of cutting the tip of your dick off.
Right. And like all of those endocrine disruptors that they keep
Mhm.
pumping in the, turning the frogs gay or all that
Yep.
like that's real. And those people that are drinking these endocrine disruptors all the time, like maybe they have this confusion and society is telling them, oh, hey, you can be whatever you want. You can
Mhm.
be a kitty cat if all you got to
Right.
do is just get surgery, and then people see you as a kitty cat, and that confirms to you and your own ego that I am a kitty cat. Like it's this cycle
Yeah,
of like,
I know.
and so this current, like so they've been chemically castrating us, and now they're convincing the kids to castrate themselves.
Mhm.
Like, and people still they don't see how genital mutilation is, I mean, circumcision is the same as cutting the whole thing off, cutting the tip or cutting the whole thing. It still causes the brain to change.
Mhm.
So eunuchs were the only ones who were allowed in the queen's chamber, so that they couldn't rape the queen, whatever.
Right.
But also the eunuchs were in the past, like they weren't preoccupied with having families and shit. They could study and become black magicians, well, magicians, I guess, or be
Mhm.
scientists. And um, so a lot of the dark occult, like person that's behind the king whispering in his ear is a eunuch. you know
It is a eunuch.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, have you ever noticed how it's always the eunuch in the movies when you watch a movie about like ancient Greece or Persia or something like that?
Right.
They're always the king's right hand man, the eunuch.
Yes. Yes.
And you wonder if they've been through this black magic ritual because they're now a vessel for the king. They are the person who whispers
Right.
the
They no
decisions.
longer have a will because their penis represents their will because you are
Right.
driven by
Yes.
sex.
That's kind of where I was going with
Yeah,
that.
it's
Now
like
they're
removal.
open. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so another ancient uh, religion is the Babylon religion of Ishtar. The Ishtar is like Queen Semiramis of Babylon. Like Semiramis was representing Ishtar in the flesh. Like she is Semiramis alive, and her husband Nimrod. And before that, Ishtar is the same story as Inanna, which had Tammuz as the husband, and the story of and it's the same as the goddess Cybele, from ancient Turkey, which came to Greece and then went from Greece to Rome. And the so have you ever heard of Attis? Attis?
No, but I've heard of Sybil because she was the one who gave all those prophetic visions of what was going to happen. She wasn't that her?
Oh, are you thinking of the
She was
Oracle?
the
You're thinking of the
Oracle.
Oracle of Delphi? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, wasn't her name Sybil?
I don't know if but no, this is different. This is a goddess, Sybil. She is like um, a black stone. So if you think about the Muslims and what that whole thing,
Oh,
so like she was a
the thing
meteorite,
that they
a
walk
black,
around.
right? The
Hmm.
Kaaba, which is a cube, a black cube. So, but she's like a black stone from heaven, I guess, and she was born out of a mountain, and so like that was her inception. Is like whatever. Anyway, so her grandson is Attis, and Attis castrated himself because Sybil put a mind control like sickness, like a mental sickness in him because she was mad that he was going to marry some other woman and she wanted to marry him or whatever. And so she made him mad, crazy. And he like chopped the whole thing, balls, cock, you know,
Oh
under,
my God.
yeah, under a pine tree. And the blood from this dripped on the ground and purple violets rose from the blood. Like there was such like fertility in it that it made purple violets rise up out of the ground from the blood dribble. And to the cult of Sybil, the people would worship Attis. So like they would bring a pine tree in their house around the 25th of December and they would hang purple violets in it because they're worshiping Attis.
Oh my
It's a fertility.
God.
Yeah. So this Christian tree of bringing a tree in your house has nothing to do with Christ. It's about Attis. And this person fully cuts all of it off. And then they put a reed in the urethra so that he can pee so it doesn't seal. So, like, that is the priests of Sybil would do this. They would cut off everything. And then they would dress up as a woman and they would sell their ass like a woman, like a whore does her pussy. And they would make money with it and they would give that money to the church. They would become a church, whore for the church.
Oh my God, Sean, you're not fucking serious right
I'm
now.
totally serious. Everybody should look it up. Cybele, Cybele, the cult of Cybele, and the story of Attis and Attis. Like, look it up. This is legit. So the old cult of Cybele is hidden within Christianity, And the priests of Cybele were called the Galli, Galli, and it kind of makes me think about how Jesus had long hair and he was from Galilee and he never laid with a woman and all this stuff. And so I'm thinking that maybe they even folded it into the Jesus story, but I don't want to get
Wow.
anybody mad, any Christians.
No, I mean,
Just some ideas,
you're just talking out loud, and
right? Right.
it's interesting to me, but I still, Sean, I'm telling you, I feel like that's the transgenderism thing. I
That's what
think
I was getting at. Yes, yes.
yes.
Yes. So, like the ancient religion of Ishtar, Inanna, like I talked about it in my Eyes Wide Shut presentation. Like that's what those MK Ultra slaves, like the wife in that movie, she is representing the queen of heaven, like the Ishtar.
Mm-hmm.
She is Ishtar in the ritual, and then they all have sex with her. Like in the old days, uh, Ishtar, the so Ishtar is Easter. That's where they get Easter from, Ishtar. And there would be a celebration in the spring, and that is when the fertility comes back to the land. So Inanna was went to the underworld and was trapped there by her sister Erishkigal. And in order to free herself, Enki sent some like homunculus things down there to free her, to get her out. But in order to do so, she had to make a deal with Erishkigal that she would have somebody else take her place. So what she does is she went up and she was trying to decide who, and she saw her husband Tammuz was not wearing black. He wasn't mourning her death or whatever, and he was like fornicating with new women, wasn't even thinking about her anymore. And she was so pissed, she was like, you go to hell. Just like Midsommar, when the
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend sends the cheating boyfriend to the
Yep.
fire. Same. So like this ancient cult of, it's a fertility cult, and that's what the Jesus thing is, another representation of that. The path of the sun through the year, and the so in Easter, in Ishtar, Tammuz is trapped in the underworld for 6 months of the year, and then he's allowed to come up again. And when Tammuz comes up from the ground, or from under the underworld, he fornicates with Ishtar, and that fertility brings springtime on the planet. And so the cult of Ishtar, the high priestess, would fornicate with the king. So then you got this church and state are literally fornicating every
Mm-hmm.
year. So the king takes on the role of Tammuz, and the woman, the priestess, the high priestess, is Ishtar. So that's why in Eyes Wide Shut they got all those Ishtar stars at the party, and like when,
Oh shit.
yeah, and that's what the ritual is. It's fertility ritual. They're impregnating the women, like but anyway, so like so the woman is the so they're making, that's how fertility happens on the earth. Like they need to continue their
Mm-hmm.
process of fertility rituals. And so this, like the ancient occult practice of cutting off everything and dressing like a woman is still happening today, and they're rolling it out on the public, and they're like, you should do this, it's a good idea. But
And
really they're
boosting it.
convincing us all to to participate in the ancient ritual of Attis. um and they would, there would be a procession of the Gali, and the Sybil also was very powerful in Rome. She was called Magna Mater, and um, they would have these processions of her cult that would come through town, and the people, like the Gali priests, would whip themselves with these cat o' nine tails that have claws on them, just like Jesus got,
Mm-hmm.
and they would try to bring blood. They're trying to make blood because it's like Attis's blood and the fertility, and so they would like be feeling this pain, but they would be in ecstasy at the time, you know. So it's more of the crossing of
Pain
the
and
pain and
pleasure.
pleasure, right? So like they are traumatized victims just doing, and the regular Romans are like aghast at this spectacle
Hmm.
and these men that dress as women and like they're going through, and but Rome allowed it because they would make so much money, because all of the females that would become they would families would give their daughters to the cult of Sybil, because it would be like their families would, like it was like a honor
Jesus
to have your
Christ.
kid. So like before your daughter is pubescent, like pre-pubescent, they would give their daughter to the cult, and then they would train that daughter to only like to lay with every male that asks her to. And so like the way that Catholic Church, you give money to the to like you
Hmm.
bring money and you put it in the plate as it passes along. That's what, and it then they absolve your sins because you brought money.
Hmm.
That is a continuation of the Sybil cult, where people would like they would bring their daughters, and their daughters are trained to be whores, and then all of the men would would come and give money to this woman who's not allowed to say no. And then when they ejaculate, that is the expression of all their sins. They're releasing all their sins out, and then they're pure again. Then they can go home and
They
go
release them into another person.
into
Oh
the
my
receptacle
God.
of the right. And like the woman is not allowed to fall in love, to have, she's not allowed to prefer to only lay with one man. She's only allowed to have sex with every man. And that, if you look at Brave New World and that book of like how they're trained, like, you know, everybody's for everyone, and we're all, you know, you're supposed to have sex with everybody. And like, because this is a, the ancient goddess cult of Ishtar in Anna Sybil is being put into the world again. It's being reintegrated into our daily life because the dark occultists want to bring it out into the, that's,
You
I
know,
mean,
we saw another
yeah.
huge push for that in the 60s, which is why I always rail about like the counterculture movement of the 60s, because it was under the disguise of be free, do what you want to do whatever you want to do, take birth control pills
Right,
and fuck everybody.
right,
That was the push in the 60s. So
exactly,
it's just like it's just another form of that.
right. They
Like
were including
don't get
people,
married,
right,
don't be pure, don't
right,
be no, fuck everyone.
right,
And don't worry about getting pregnant because we'll give you these birth control pills.
right. Thank you, Margaret Sanger, you know, and thank you,
Yep.
abortion, and all of that
Hmm.
was like, you know, abortion legal eventually, you know, and
Yep.
it's the same as the fertility rituals of, you know, the Baal worshippers who would make babies and infanticide them, you know.
Fuck.
It's including us in these dark occult practices.
And in
And
a
then
way, we are consenting to it.
yes, yes. This world is a consent reality. Like we consented to be here, I believe, and I own myself. I am the one who moves my body. In order to make someone, in order for anyone to make me do anything, I must consent to it. You know, even if I have chains on my neck and they're pointing a shotgun at my face and they're like, pick this cotton, I could say no. You know, I don't have to
And
pick the
die.
cotton. I might die, but
Hmm.
you know, like
Yeah, I mean,
I
but that's
control
just like the
myself.
reality of it is,
Yes.
will you let fear control you?
Yes. And if we are raised in fear, if we're taught that we don't own our bodies, then we're going to comply. We're going to
Yes.
be fodder for them and their dark ritual. We're, you know, we are just food for their
Yep. And fear is
evil.
a lie. Fear is a lie.
Right. Right.
That's what
Yeah.
I tell people is, you know, we have our differences, you and I, Sean, but we agree on so much. And I
Right.
always tell people, pray about everything and fear nothing,
Yes.
because fear is a lie. And I think that people do things out of fear, and then they say that it's just practicality.
Right. Well,
And it's not.
well, their worldview is such that they believe they must, because this, that's just how their worldview is constructed. And it all goes back to the trauma that we endured, pre-birth in the womb and post-birth out here in this world that has it's becoming a hell. If the more we give consent to them, the more they're going to tighten the screws. And, they're not going to stop at just our foreskin. Now they're taking the whole thing,
Yes.
Before they had to make the mother's consent to the foreskin being removed. Now that the mothers are starting to say no, and they're starting to realize like maybe circumcision's not a good idea, now they're getting the kids before they're old enough to think for themselves. Hey, that part of your body, you shouldn't have that. Because you have that, you are, messed up mentally, and you're in the wrong body. Like, think of the levels of mind control.
To chemically castrate themselves because they're starting them on the hormone blockers and the estrogen and all of that. That's such a young age. It's irreversible.
Right. Yeah. And it damages their bones, and they grow up scoliosis and like all this, we need to recognize that them aren't here to help us. They are dominating us. And it's like a Stockholm syndrome where we think like, oh, they love us,
right?
Just like the abused wife, like, he really loves me, as she's got a black eye, and like,
yep.
We think, oh, they're trying to help us and save us from all these fearful things. But really, they created the fear, just like the 9/11 at the television showing us the explosion and the people jumping. Like, that created in us. From now on, we will remember that, and we will think fearfully, because
and it's a trust thing, because people want to be trusting, just like people want to trust you and I. But what they really should do is go and look up everything and read things for themselves and come to their own conclusions. And when somebody in a lab coat tells you something, don't be so trusting. Go and do the research for yourself. Research anything that anybody tells you. You should go and do the research on your own. Like, you can't just blindly trust like that. You can absorb information and then go and check it out for yourself and decide if it's trustworthy or not. Do not let people make up your mind for you.
Right. That is the most sacred thing, is you own your mind, you own your soul and your body. And the only way that they can really, what they want to control your soul and your mind and your body. And if you take control of it yourself, then they have no power, really. So that's why I'm an anarchist. That's why I push these ideas of self-ownership. And that's why circumcision is so important to me. But first of all, I've been abused that way. But second of all, I own my body. And you do too. And everybody does. And for them to steal part of it because they don't deem us worthy enough to own it, it's such a violation of us on a soul level, on mind and our body. And it happens right there at the beginning, like before we even have a self. We are still not, like, our ego is still connected to the mother. It's still like
dependent on the mother.
Right. And we don't have a full idea of self until we're like 7. We're just in a hypnagogic trance, like absorbing subconscious information. So if they affect us then at that very inception of creating a self, then it influences that self. to be how they want it for the like, and I can be very aggressive in like, in arguments, and like I don't hit people and stuff. I get pretty hardcore, like,
Yeah.
and it's probably because of this, and it's like, now I see it as part of my personality, but really, what if I wasn't abused in that way? What if, maybe I wouldn't be like that, but I'll never know. I'll never know what it feels like to have real sex, like what it really feels like to have my skin suction cup to her skin, and
That sacred
that
bond.
sacred bond it's been stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And I own my sacred bond, and how dare they,
Mm-hmm.
and every new baby that's gonna be coming to this world also owns themselves, and all you mothers that are listening need to protect that and make sure that they know that they own their body, and it's not, we don't have the right to
Yes.
circumcise babies.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the right.
It's just kind of going back to something that we were talking about earlier, though, is you may have been abused, but you're never too old to break the cycle of abuse, because you saved your son from abuse.
Yes.
So just because you were abused and you're a grown man now and you recognize the abuse, you did not allow your son to become an abused person as well. You broke the cycle, you broke the chain. And that's why, even coming into conspiracies as an adult person, your mind has been set in a certain way. You've probably been abused. You've probably been traumatized your entire life, but it's never too late to break that cycle for yourself and then for your kids. I am that person in my family that's always like, watch this video, do this. I'm not silent. You cannot be silent.
Yes.
Make yourself
so important to have
known.
a voice. Yes.
Yes. And I know that you said you have a video on this. You have a YouTube, or where
yeah, you can find it. You can
more?
find it on YouTube. That's actually the only stuff that I post on YouTube, because the stuff I talk about is so controversial, and like you said, you're telling William Ramsey, I guess, that the episodes that you did with me were removed from Spotify because the stuff we talk about is like, that's the main core of like, so anyway,
they're hot button items.
Right. So I don't even bother like posting things to YouTube except my circumcision stuff. I did episode 21 of my show is titled Circumcision is Child Sacrifice. And the presentation that Jennifer, my wife, and I did is called His Body, His Choice. And you can find those on Wake the Dead YouTube channel. I think it's YouTube/Wake the Dead, youtube.com, whatever. And you can find everything else, including my circumcision work, at Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble. You can find me as Wake the Dead. And I'm on Spotify, Apple, all the podcasters too, as Wake the Dead. And I post my friend and peer Mark Passio has a website called One Great Work Network, and he's gathered a lot of people that he thinks should have a place. And I haven't made my own website. It costs money and it's tough. I'm struggling. When I started my podcast, I was just talking the other day with somebody. When I started my podcast, I was living in my car, and I did it with my phone, so now I have a desk. It's like I'm moving up in the world. Yes. So, but Mark gave me a venue on One Great Work Network. So you can find me at onegreatworknetwork.com/Sean-McCann. And I post everything there. All the links to the YouTubes and the stuff is all there. And there's also a place to donate. If you could please donate. I work a lot and I don't have enough time to do anything. And
Right.
the more donations, the more freedom you are giving me. And it's very thankful. I thank everyone. And also, I sell T-shirts. I have this fine art photography, and this on back
Mhm.
there, the pyramid with the A above it. These are my designs, and you can find them at storefrontier.com/wake the dead. And all those links are there at onegreatworknetwork.com/Sean-McCann.
Do you have those dope ass hats on there? Because
I
I like
know.
the hat.
I think I might make some. It's tough to get it printed here. Like
Oh,
what
I'm sure.
I cut up a shirt and I made
It
this.
looks good
Yeah,
though.
thank you. Yeah. This has been my, like, when I went to Rainbow Gathering a few years ago, and one of the kids there was like, "Why don't you have a dope ass hat, man?" I'm like, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, got the sun in my eyes all the time. I'm like, yeah, I need a hat. So this is where it came from. That's where it started. But yeah,
No, it's awesome. No, I like the hat, but I hope everyone goes and finds your work. And I hope that this has reached someone and that they make a difference because your bravery in coming out and speaking about it.
thank you so much. And I hope everyone's listening, and I hope everyone uses their power to protect their family and to protect the loving bond between a mother and the baby. That's the most important relationship we have.
I
And
agree.
we need to
I
protect
agree.
that.
Hmm.
Don't let the doctor get in between. We all know after these last couple of years how evil those doctors are and who they really work for.
Hmm.
So
You don't need a middleman between you and your child
that's
to
right.
make decisions.
That's right.
So thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate it. You are the best. I always love when you join me for episodes. And thanks everyone for listening. And we will catch you on the next one.